The blaring knock on the door jolted him from his seat. Outside, red and blue lights danced across the street. A taxi driver's life was supposed to be predictable, yet here he was, staring at 3 uniformed officers. "Are you Mr. Elias Carter?" one asked, their tone heavy with purpose. Elias nodded, heart pounding. "We need to talk. It's about the couple you gave a free ride to tonight." Elias's mind raced. The couple? He thought he was just helping 2 stranded souls. But now their faces flashed before him and he knew. Something was terribly wrong. Elias Carter had driven a taxi for nearly 15 years, navigating the bustling streets of the city with a well-worn routine. Every day started the same. A quick breakfast of toast and coffee, then off to the cab, his second home. The leather seats were cracked, the radio sputtered between channels, and the faint smell of pine air freshener lingered. But it was his livelihood. The city never slept, and neither did Elias, it seemed. His nights stretched endlessly, ferrying passengers who barely acknowledged him, businessmen buried in their phones, partygoers reeking of cheap booze, and the occasional tourist asking for recommendations he didn't have. But tonight felt different. The rain hammered against his windshield, the rhythmic sweep of the wipers almost hypnotic. The streets were quieter than usual, their usual chaos muffled by the downpour. Elias sighed, glancing at the meter, barely enough to cover gas, let alone the mounting stack of bills on his kitchen counter. Financially, he was hanging by a thread. Rent was due, his daughter's tuition loomed large, and every call from the bank made his stomach churn. But what choice did he have? This was the grind, the life he had known for years. He'd always been a man of quiet endurance, pushing forward even when the world seemed intent on pushing him back. As he rounded a corner, headlights reflected off the slick pavement. Elias spotted a couple huddled under a bus stop, drenched and shivering. Their umbrella was useless against the storm, and the last bus had likely come and gone. Something in their weary faces tugged at him. Without hesitation, Elias pulled over, rolling down the window. "Need a ride?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Little did he know this small act of kindness would change everything. Elias hesitated for a brief moment as he pulled his taxi to a stop. The rain showed no mercy, drumming relentlessly against the roof of the car. He glanced at the couple huddled under the flickering bus stop light. Their clothes were soaked, their faces pale and drawn. The man held a useless, wind-tattered umbrella over the woman, whose eyes darted nervously down the empty street. He could have kept driving. Lord knows he needed paying fares, not charity. But something in the woman's eyes stopped him, a mixture of fear and quiet desperation. Elias lowered the passenger window, the cold wind carrying the sharp scent of rain inside. "Need a lift?" he called out, trying to sound casual despite the sinking feeling in his gut. The couple exchanged a quick, silent glance. The man stepped forward, pulling the woman with him. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "We don't have any money." Elias shrugged. "It's on the house, just get in before you catch pneumonia." They slid into the back seat, shivering and damp. The woman's hands trembled as she wrung out her scarf, water pooling on the worn leather. Elias adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a brief glimpse of her face. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s, with a softness in her expression that seemed at odds with the tension in her shoulders. "Where to?" Elias asked, trying to break the silence. "Just downtown," the man said after a pause. His voice was measured, almost too calm. He kept one arm protectively around the woman, who stared out the window, her reflection ghostly against the dark glass. As Elias drove, he made small talk to lighten the mood. "Rough night, huh? This rain doesn't let up?" The man nodded, but his response was vague. "Yeah, you could say that." The woman finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for stopping. Not many would." Elias chuckled softly. "Well, I've been stuck in a storm or two myself. It's no fun waiting for a bus that won't come." The tension in the car eased slightly. The man even managed a small, tight smile. "Kindness is rare these days. We're grateful." Elias waved it off. "Just pay it forward someday." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic patter of rain filling the space. But as they neared downtown, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man kept glancing out the rear window, as if expecting someone to follow them. And the woman, though quiet, had an air of quiet urgency. her fingers constantly fidgeting with the edge of her coat. "You two in some kind of trouble?" Elias asked, half joking. But the question lingered in the air. The man stiffened. "Just trying to get somewhere safe," he said, his tone curt. Elias didn't press. He knew better than to pry into the lives of strangers, but when he pulled up to the address they finally gave, a nondescript corner near a closed diner, the woman leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his in the rearview mirror. "Thank you," she said softly, but there was something more in her tone, something that made Elias's skin prickle. "You've done more for us than you know." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope, placing it on the seat beside him. Before Elias could say anything, they were gone, disappearing into the shadows of the rain-soaked street. Elias picked up the envelope. Its weight light, but its presence heavy. He wasn't sure why, but he suddenly felt uneasy, as if this act of kindness had set something into motion, something he couldn't take back. Elias sat in his cab for a few minutes after the couple had disappeared, the envelope still resting on the passenger seat. The rain had finally eased, leaving behind a mist that clung to the quiet streets. He stared at the envelope, its plain white exterior unmarked except for the faint creases where it had been folded. Curiosity gnawed at him. He picked it up and carefully tore it open. Inside was a single slip of paper. No message, no signature, just an address scrawled in neat handwriting. Elias frowned. It wasn't an address he recognized, and there was no explanation. "What the hell?" he muttered, folding it back up. Maybe it was some kind of tip, a weird way of saying thanks. He shoved it into his jacket pocket, deciding he'd figure it out later. Right now he just wanted to get home, kick off his wet shoes, and pretend this strange night hadn't happened. But when he pulled into his driveway, something felt off. His house, usually so quiet this time of night, was lit up like a beacon. Every light was on, and 2 police cars sat parked in front. His neighbor, Mrs. Rhodes, stood nervously on her porch, clutching a robe around her. Elias got out of the cab, confusion turning quickly into dread. "Mrs. Rhodes, what's going on?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "The police have been here for over an hour, Elias. They've been waiting for you." "For me?" His heart pounded. "Why?" They wouldn't say, but one of them mentioned something about a couple. She lowered her voice, glancing around. "You need to go inside. Now." Elias didn't waste another second. He pushed open the front door, his stomach tightening. Inside, 2 officers stood in his living room, their expressions serious. The younger one stepped forward as soon as he entered. "Mr. Carter?" "That's me," Elias said cautiously. "What's this about?" The officer exchanged a glance with his partner before pulling out a small notepad. "We're here about the couple you picked up earlier tonight." Elias blinked. "What about them?" "They were just some folks caught in the rain." The older officer spoke this time, his tone heavier. "Did they tell you anything? Mention where they were coming from or why they were in such a hurry?" "No," Elias said slowly. "They just asked for a ride downtown. Seemed like they'd had a rough night, so I gave them a lift. That's it." The officers exchanged another look, and Elias's frustration bubbled up. "Look, can someone tell me what's going on? I'm just a taxi driver. I gave them a free ride." End of story. The younger officer sighed. "Mr. Carter, the couple you picked up tonight, they're not ordinary people. They're wanted in connection with a major investigation." Elias felt the ground shift beneath him. "Investigation? What kind of investigation?" "We can't disclose all the details," the officer said, "but let's just say they're involved in something highly sensitive. We've been tracking them for weeks, and tonight they vanished. The last anyone saw of them was when they got into your cab." Elias's mind reeled. They didn't seem like criminals, just scared. "They're not exactly criminals," the older officer said carefully. "They're whistleblowers, Mr. Carter. They have information that could expose powerful people, and those people will do anything to keep them silent." The room seemed to close in around him. Whistleblowers? Powerful people? He thought back to the couple's nervous glances, the tension in their voices. "They left me an envelope," Elias blurted out, reaching into his jacket pocket. He handed it over, and the younger officer carefully unfolded the paper. His eyes widened as he read the address. "This changes everything," he said, his voice almost a whisper. He turned to his partner. "We need to secure this location immediately." Before Elias could ask what that meant, the older officer pulled out his radio, barking orders. "Unit Bravo, we have a confirmed address. Move in now." Elias felt like a spectator in his own life, watching as the officers sprang into action. The younger one turned back to him. Mr. Carter, you've just become part of something much bigger than you realize. For your safety, we need you to come with us." "My safety?" Elias echoed, his voice cracking. "I didn't ask for any of this." The officer nodded grimly. "I know, but those people you helped, they trusted you. And now, whether you like it or not, you're in the middle of a storm." Before Elias could protest, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The cavalry had arrived. But as he looked at the officers, one thought consumed him. What exactly had he stumbled into? The ride to the mysterious address was tense. Elias sat in the back of an unmarked police car flanked by the two officers. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with tension. As they neared their destination, Elias couldn't help but wonder what he was walking into. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The older officer glanced back at him. "It's better if you see for yourself." They pulled up to a nondescript warehouse on the city's outskirts. A row of black SUVs was parked outside, and a group of serious-looking men and women in suits stood waiting. As soon as the car stopped, one of them approached, her presence commanding. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her tone brisk but not unkind. Elias nodded, stepping out of the car. "My name is Agent Monroe. We've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" Elias repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "I'm just a cab driver. I don't know what's going on." Monroe gave a small, knowing smile. "That's exactly why you were chosen." Before Elias could respond, she gestured for him to follow. They entered the warehouse, which was nothing like he had expected. The interior was sleek and modern, filled with high-tech equipment and bustling with activity. Monitors lined the walls displaying maps, documents, and live security feeds. It felt more like the nerve center of a spy thriller than a taxi driver's life. Monroe led him to a quiet conference room where the couple from earlier sat waiting. Elias froze, his heart pounding. The man and woman looked vastly different now, dry, composed, and exuding a quiet confidence. "You made it," the man said, standing to shake Elias's hand. "We owe you everything." Elias stared at them, his confusion mounting. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with gratitude. "My name is Dr. Amelia Clark, and this is my husband David. We've been working undercover to expose corruption within a powerful organization. The information we carry is explosive. Names, transactions, proof of crimes that go all the way to the top." David nodded. "We've been on the run for weeks. We couldn't trust anyone until we found you." "Me? Why me?" Amelia smiled softly. "Because you're an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart. You didn't hesitate to help two strangers in need, even when you had nothing to gain. We needed someone pure, someone who wouldn't ask questions or raise suspicion. Your kindness gave us a chance to escape and get the evidence to the right people." Elias sank into a chair, trying to process everything. "So, the envelope? It contained the location of this safe house," David explained. "You were the last link in a chain designed to protect us. Without you, we wouldn't have made it." Monroe re-entered the room, placing a thick dossier on the table. "Thanks to Mr. Carter's assistance, we now have everything we need to bring these criminals to justice. But there's more." She looked directly at Elias. "We understand the risk you took tonight, even if you didn't realize it at the time. You've proven yourself to be a man of integrity and courage. That's why we want to offer you something." Elias blinked. "Offer me what?" Amelia leaned in, her voice gentle but firm. "A new start. We know about your financial struggles, your daughter's tuition, and the weight you carry every day. We can help." David added, "A trust fund has been set up in your name, enough to cover your debts and secure your family's future. It's our way of thanking you for your selflessness." Elias felt a lump form in his throat. "I didn't do it for money." "We know," Amelia said softly. "That's what makes you the right person for this. You reminded us that there's still good in the world, and that's something worth protecting." The room fell silent as Elias grappled with the offer. On one hand, it felt like a dream, an escape from the relentless grind of his life. On the other, it was overwhelming. Could he accept such a gift? "What's the catch?" he asked finally. "There's always a catch." Monroe shook her head. "No catch, just a request. If you ever find someone in need, someone who can't repay you, pass it on. Continue the cycle of kindness." Elias let the words sink in. He thought of his daughter, her hopeful face as she talked about her dreams. He thought of the bills piling up, the endless nights driving through rain and exhaustion, and he thought of the couple who had placed their trust in him. believing in his goodness. Finally, he exhaled deeply. "I'll do it." Amelia's smile widened. "Thank you, Elias. You've already done more than you know." As the meeting concluded, Elias felt a strange mix of relief and responsibility. His life was about to change, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about carrying forward a legacy of trust and compassion. When he left the warehouse that night, the rain had stopped, and the sky was beginning to clear. For the first time in years, Elias felt a lightness in his step. He wasn't just a taxi driver anymore. He was a man who had made a difference, and that knowledge warmed him like the first rays of dawn. As he drove home, he glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror. A new chapter was beginning, and for once, he felt ready to embrace it. Weeks later, Elias stood on his small balcony, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. The morning sun bathed the city in a golden glow, and for the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. His daughter's college acceptance letter sat proudly on the kitchen table, her future secure. The weight of financial stress had lifted, but more than that, Elias carried with him a newfound sense of purpose. He thought about Amelia and David, the couple whose lives he had unknowingly helped save. Their journey reminded him that even the smallest act of kindness could set off a chain of events far beyond what anyone could imagine. Kindness wasn't just a fleeting gesture, it was a force that could change lives, ripple by ripple, and Elias knew that he was part of something much bigger now, something meaningful. As he took a deep breath, the world felt full of possibility. One small choice, one moment of compassion, had led to this. Sometimes, the greatest gifts come from unexpected places. How has kindness shaped your life? Share your story below in one word.